Hello again, and thank you for joining me for another episode of the Noble Father Podcast. I am your host, Theophilus, and today is October the 27th of 2025. And it's probably been a while since you've heard an episode because I've been away traveling. And today's episode is really going to be talking about my whole experience in this trip. For those of you that are tuning in for the first time, this is really a podcast of me just sharing a lot of my life, the journeys, the lessons, the failures as a father, my own spiritual journey, and speaking about things that God has put in my heart. And so this most recent trip I took, it was just a crazy last like 3-4 weeks that has taken place here. A few weeks back, one of the fathers in my community, his name is Dan. He lives out in Florida, and we connected because, he joined the fathers group and we, really hit it off. And he's really taken a very, very interesting trajectory in his life. He grew up with a bit of a Catholic background. And so, the journey through life, and searching for the, answers, right? As a father, it was a very long and arduous journey, and one in which I had the privilege of walking with him through to find his way back to Christ. And this trip wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for God's orchestration, and there's a lot of glory to be given to God for that. Because if he hadn't joined the group, then we wouldn't have connected, and if we hadn't met each other on that very first retreat in our Noble Father group, he wouldn't be where he is today, I would say, right? And finding a church in his local area. He had recently moved, found a church where he was fed, his wife was fed, and his children were fed. And in that church, he met another gentleman by the name of Tim. And Tim is really gung-ho about man camp. And so, made the pitch to Dan about, hey, you should totally come check out Man Camp. It's a camp that happens out in Cincinnati every single year. Guys from all over the United States gather there, and they camp out, and they learn about, they're taking parts in campfires with other guys. Brian Tome, who's the author of the book, 5 Marks of a Man. This isn't the book. This is the devotional. Puts on this event. There's worship. There's kegs of beer if that's your thing. Your vices are accepted there. You can go to a mash tent where you can get prayed for. Just like an amazing thing to hear about from the outside, but then, to go take part was just another thing entirely. So, Tim makes the pitch to Dan. Dan reaches out and he says, hey, our team is a little sparse. We got some guys that have dropped out of the team. Would you consider coming out and taking part in this event with me? And so in my head, I'm like, man, that would be amazing, right? And obviously prayerfully asking God, Lord, like, is this what you want me to do? It's not merely just praying and God just kind of drops a yes into your lap and, then you know what you got to do. We went on to Skyscanner and tried to find some tickets and found a return trip from Atlanta to Vancouver direct for $50 American. And you can't really find anything like that. And so, made the decision to bought the ticket and used points to find the Vancouver to Cincinnati leg. Trips like this is always difficult, right? Leaving behind your family as a father is not an easy thing to do. But when God calls you to do something, you have to be obedient. And so made the purchases and got myself ready to go. And, because this is a camp out, you have to bring a tent, you have to bring a sleeping bag, you have to bring, there's so many things you have to bring. And if not for the guys that were in Florida helping me figure this out, it would not have been possible. And one of the things about the trip was also that, there'd be some time afterwards where we debrief and we'll go through Tennessee. And so, the whole outline of the trip just worked itself out. Fly to Cincinnati, meet some friends that I've met for a long time and never met in person, and then attend this camp, be with these guys as they drive to Tennessee, and then spend a few nights, and then on their way back to Florida, drop me off at Atlanta, and I fly out of there. So it was just orchestrated so beautifully and to the T, and it was just amazing to get to have that time with these guys. I'd met Dan, but I hadn't met these friends of his. I've met them before in a Bible study online, but never in person, and so finally get to meet these guys. And Dan and I have developed this kind of very interesting relationship where it's, we've really greatly benefited from interacting with one another and sharing each other's journey and holding each other accountable in our walks. It's a beautiful relationship when you get to, go deep. And me and Dan just like love to go deep. Like there's no desire to stay on the surface with one another. And that's kind of the thing that we're trying to build in Noble Father, right? So if you're listening to this for the first time, listen at the end. I'm going to be talking about a plug, for our community. So went out to this camp, man, my experience started before I even got to Cincinnati, right? It's not easy for my wife to drive me all the way to Vancouver to the airport, which is an hour away from us here, especially on a weekday. And so we made the decision that they would drop me off at a neighboring city, and this city would have a SkyTrain that takes 3 hours at least for me to get to Richmond, where my friend was going to pick me up, and then they were going to drop me off at the airport the next day. So dropped me off, and I left them there. Goodbyes were never easy. I don't enjoy saying goodbye to my kids, and, but this time it was less tears. And even with less tears, you're kind of like, you're happy that it's less tears, but you're also like realizing that your kids are growing up and that the same emotions they had early on whenever you left them are not the same. And it seems to get easier and easier for them, but harder and harder for you as a parent, because it's just harder for you to let go. And as a father, I don't enjoy leaving my family behind. But when God calls you to do something, you have no choice but to be obedient. And so said goodbye to them, took the SkyTrain to my friend's house, stayed with them. It was good to see them again. And then I flew out the next morning. And so I'm flying to Cincinnati. I've never been there before. There are friends there, like I said, that I'd never met before. I networked with a guy named Gary Rogers, and he introduced me to this Bible study that they do in Cincinnati every Thursday morning. And so I joined them since, like, coming out of COVID. I joined them. And, it was good, man. It was a part of my spiritual growth. It was good to have that community. And on this call, I met this woman named Sabrina, and we interacted, so she was Asian and everybody else was white. So, we just connected, I guess, on a level. And eventually I met her husband. His name was Derek. And so, I reached out to them and said, hey, can I stay with you guys? It'd be good to see you guys, see your family, right? He just recently became a father. And, man, we had interacted a lot on the internet and connected and became really good friends and talking about stuff like China, because they spent some time in China doing ministry as well. And so you interacted with them and flew in, met them for the first time. He picked me up. It was like an hour away from the airport. So you can imagine, I've never met these people before, but, we're like spiritual brothers and sisters. And so almost like as if we knew each other. So they picked me up at the airport and, man, brought me to their house, had a room ready for me, stayed with them, interacted, good conversations. And the very next day went out to go attend the Bible study in person. And so there was a few staff members who knew that I was going to be in attendance, but they refused to tell Billy, who's the guy who runs the company that does the Bible study every single week. And so, they let me in, and they walk over to Billy's office and they tell Billy, hey, Billy, we got a new hire. You should meet him. And he had no idea, right? So he comes out and, surprise, right? Surprise. He's like, Theo, I can't believe you're here. And it was just such an amazing moment. Like something that I always am so full of gratitude for God just like give me this like super interesting life to get to live, get to meet these people that I've never met before, get to see them in person, hug them, pray with them, go through the Bible together. And because I interacted with them over the screen, over Zoom or over, Meetup, whatever, to be on the other side of the camera suddenly and to see people that I, where I'd normally be on their screen was just such a surreal experience. It just blew my mind. to be able to share that with them. I was only there with them for an hour. We prayed together. We went through the Bible together, and I had to part ways with them. But before I left, Billy told me that he had a friend who serves at man camp. So this is like the day before I head into the camp. And so he was like, hey, here's the number, exchange text messages with them. His name is Jim. And hey, be on the lookout for them when they're at the man camp. So still, I'm kind of like still trying to get my bearings. And part of going on these trips, you kind of feel like, man, is this real life? Like, what's going on here? Like, is this the life that I get to live? Like, you're kind of pinching yourself, kind of like, man, Lord, like, I'm so blessed. Like, thank you for allowing me to be on this journey. And so got a new name and had a mutual, right? And also told me that, to deliver a message to Brian Tome himself and say that we're praying for his wife, Livy, who's going through breast cancer diagnosis. It's not an easy thing to hear. But then suddenly I had a mission, right? Had to, show up in the man camp with a purpose and go actually shake Brian Tome's hand and tell him that, there are people that are praying for him and his wife. And so very next day, got to go have brunch, meet one of the dads, and another dad in my community who I'd never met before, who lives in Cincinnati. Got to have breakfast with him. Dan and his friend Otto showed up, and I brought along Derek. And man, we just had a good fathers. All 5 of us were fathers. Got to network and fellowship together and get to meet this dad Chad for the first time. Man, those meetups are always amazing, so splendid and amazing to see God orchestrate all these things, for whatever the purpose is, God's will. And then we headed into the camp. First we stopped at a store called Jungle Gyms. If you're familiar with Jungle Gyms, it's like the world's craziest grocery store probably. There's so many things I can't even tell you. When you walk in there, it's like a Costco with just so many things to look at. It's like statues and figurines and, foods from all over the world, right? You can get these avocados that are the size of your head. You can get, all kinds of different kinds of meats, like ostrich meat, gator meat. And I was a little disappointed there wasn't dog meat or cat meat. But, whatever it is, that's a little bit of a faux pas, I guess, for other people. But, it was amazing experience just to see a side of the world that you just didn't know. I've never been to Ohio before. And so, got to the camp and kind of trying to get your bearings. And it was amazing how many cars were pulling in. Every rest stop along the way, you saw there was trucks and cars full of dudes, and guys were outside of their trucks talking, and you knew it was coming, right? This is 4,000 men all descending upon 800-acre property, and they're about to worship Jesus. They're about to do giant campfires with one another and, talk about deep level things. And, one of the things leading up to the event was, our team lead, Tim, was, gave us a question as we were heading in, kind of like, what boyish tendencies are you leaving behind at man camp? It really set the stage for the entire event. So we got to the event, got registered, got set up, and it was a super long walk from where we parked our car all the way to where we were camping, right? Remember I said 800 acres of land. I mean, you're talking about, a great swath of land. And so, you're carrying all this gear. We got a cart, filled with, a cooler with food and all this stuff. So we're just lugging it there. And the experience starts way before you even get to the event. And so we find our place, we set up camp, and man, it was a bit of a trudge, and you want to do it as a team. So, some people are slower than the others, and man, good thing I have my fitness about me, or else I would not be able to make that journey myself. I'm trying to support the other guys, trying to make it out there. And so we set up tents, set up our camp, and get situated. And it's good that these guys had a setup for me. And so we're trying to just get our bearings. And so, the very first night we have a gathering, and man, really set the stage, right? You hear the music, you hear the expectations for the weekend. Man, getting to know these guys was just something else entirely. Man, it's just so much to pack in there. And, I feel like I'm not going to be able to fully express the whole event to you. And even as I reconcile it in my own head about what the whole experience, taught me, or what did I walk away with? I can't even fully grasp everything that I took away. Some things you just have to experience and take away. It's almost like you're explaining a concert to somebody. But, I'll share this one moment at man camp that really like blew me away, and almost like, and it did almost kind of take me away from enjoying it fully. Almost gave me a negative experience. So one of our campfires, because Dan and I are just like, we just love going deep. And these guys, some of these guys do like going deep as well, but just not to the extent that we would like to do. And it's not to say that they're not as deep as us or whatever. It's just that we'd held space for so long on Noble Father that, we just go to a depth right away. Like, we're just interested in going into the heart right away and not stay at the surface. And so, one of the nights, there's a member in our group. You can tell that he was a little bit more reserved. And so, they had been talking to him, and he had the opportunity to share his story. And so, as we're sitting around the campfire, we're all united again. And we go to talk about our story, and, Dan was sharing his story, and he asked to read a certain passage from the Bible, one that really impacted him in his quiet time. We're given solitude time, and so we were going about the talk, and he was like, "Hey, can you please read 1 Peter?" So I read the first chapter of 1 Peter, and as I'm reading, this gentleman is kind of making like giggling noises, and he's farting, and he's clicking away on his bottle. He's making this like clanking noise. And I just like feel my blood start to like boil, and I just and I continue reading, obviously disturbed, right? Just like blown away by what I'm seeing as very boyish qualities from this person. Like, why do you feel like it's appropriate to be doing that right now while reading God's word, for one, right? Very important. And this person had attended 3 other man camp events, and so you'd expect more from somebody like that. And so I finished reading the passage, and as Dan starts to share again, I just have to cut him off, because our community, Noble Father, is one in which you call out bullshit as soon as you see it, right? And so I just feel this stirring in my heart. I silently do a prayer in my heart, and I ask Lord for the words to speak out, because I just couldn't tolerate it anymore. And so I, bring up, I just, I don't want to say go on the offensive, but I go to talk about it. Like, hey man, like, how do you think it's appropriate to be showing up this way for your brothers in this in this little campfire, right? And because this person had shared some stuff about their family, it was like, hey, like, is the energy you're presenting to us here like how you present yourself to your family? Because if it is, man, like, that's very telling. And if the premise of going to this man camp event is to talk about the boyish tendencies that we have, man, you're presenting to us as a boy. Like, that's just, there's no ifs, ands, and buts about it. You are showing up very boyish, and I won't stand for it. Mind you, I'm not the leader, right? Now that I think back on it, yeah, should I have done that publicly in the space with this guy that probably I've only met 36 hours ago? It wasn't ideal. But I just felt like, man, this person had been done such a disservice. If you've attended 3 other man camps and the leaders hadn't served you or spoken up boldly about the things that you're going through or doing or wanting the best for you, I just felt I had no choice but to stand up and speak into that situation in his life. And it was an amazing space. It was good for him to hear that. Later on, he expressed that nobody had ever talked to him that way. And just when I heard that, my heart kind of broke, because, on one side, I felt like I deeply offended a brother, and that perhaps my words may have hurt him. But I'd always speak from a place of earnestness rather than just like allowing him to get away with it, right? The boyish quality that we have in society now is that, political correctness, we shouldn't speak about certain things because it would offend this person. And we always preface and disclaimer our talks by saying not to get political. But it's like, dude, if being political means that we go to speak about certain things, then speak about it. Don't let this person get away with it. If you truly care about somebody's well-being, you'd speak into the bullshit and the nonsense that they're doing in their lives, right? Like if you genuinely do care about this person, say something, right? Say something, because you might be raising their awareness to the fact that, hey, you're the cause of your problems. God doesn't just come and fix it. You have to do something yourself. And so there's this beautiful moment where we prayed over each other, right? And then I was able to give him a brotherly embrace, and I held him and I said, hey, like, I say this out of love for you. I care about you. I care about your family. I care about your children. Like, they're watching your example, brother. Like, if you're presenting yourself this way to us, man, like, and you're doing that at your home, like, you're not the leader of the family. Like, that's a bad position to be in, right? You can't. We'd lose respect with our family right away, and so, we came away from that experience very much closer with one another. I don't know ultimately how it landed. We still don't really truly know, but it was just such a surreal experience to be able to speak into somebody's life that way. Albeit I probably changed the methodology of how I did it, perhaps personally. I don't know. Like, I just felt in that moment that God was telling me to speak. And so just off the cuff, and, I walked away with something for myself. I realized that, I can be more graceful with my words, and maybe my approach could have been better. And so, that was the last night. There was an experience where we had to, an exercise where we had to take a little toy soldier, which was representative of our boyish qualities. We were supposed to speak about what we were leaving behind and what we were throwing into the fire to get rid of. But as any exercise, right? If you do it, and as men, your words have power and have weight. And so if you don't put actions behind it, then your words are meaningless. And so every single person threw in their toy soldier in our campfire. And the thing is, for each of us, is like, don't throw it in if you're not going to do something about it. And so for myself, when I threw in my toy soldier, the word that I had written down in my solitude time was that fear of failure, fear of missing out, fear of whatever, fill in the blank, right? Fear of not being enough, was what I threw into the fire, right? That I was letting go of this boyish tendency to always fear, not trust that God has it in my heart. God has given me the skills, the gifts, the attributes, the character, the boldness to step unwavering into the world and to share that gift with other people. That was what I threw into the fire. And man, that whole experience of doing something like that, it's amazing what it does in a man's heart, right? You realize, man, you have so much boyish qualities within you as well. And, at a man camp event like that, it's pretty glaring to see, I'm catching myself, right? I'm catching myself in the boyish qualities that I have still, right? And, that shift in your mind, it's amazing because, you think about, man, this bag is so heavy, right? Can I keep going? Should I help push the cart, right? And then you think in your head, you're like, am I a boy or am I a man? How would a boy or a man respond to this situation? Am I going to respond as a man, or am I going to respond as a boy again and let down my team, let down my men? And that changes the actions that you take, right? You realize, man, I don't want to show up as a boy. I want to be a man. I want to be a leader. And so you take the path of most resistance, right? You take a minority position, which is what the one of the 5 marks is you take a minority position, right? Boys are easily, leaning into comfort, right? They don't seek growth. They don't seek that discomfort. And that's just not what the world needs. And so came away from that camp, man, and just blown away. One of our brothers got baptized, right? The leader wanted to get baptized at the man camp. So we got to experience that together as a community, and it was good to see us all bond together and to grow together. And who knows what God has in store for us moving forward. I think God has so many more things. And so we left the camp, man, the day that we left was just like pouring rain, and I was soaked, through and through. And it was a miserable goodbye. But with adversity, men just adjust. We grow with the hard times, and it was such an experience just to take part in that. The year prior they had dealt with a hurricane, so there were guys who actually showed up, drove up all the way from Florida to Ohio, and as they're getting out of the vehicle, seeing the hurricane, gave up, got back in their vehicles, and just drove home. Like, not to say that, and it's not my position to judge, right? But my immediate response was really like, wow, what a boyish way to respond to an adversity, right? There were guys that actually showed up and still took part and made no excuses and followed through, right? If we're told to steward our finances and resources well, investing all this money to go to show up at man camp and then show up at the parking lot just for you to say no and then turn back and go home. I don't blame them, right? Everybody has a right to make that decision. And is that really the true qualifier of a man or a boy? Yeah, subjective, right? That's up to you. For me, if I flew all the way and I told Dan, hey, like, take me back to the Airbnb, I don't want to take part in this at all. Like, that would be a very boyish thing to do. And God really showed up, and, he spoke to all of us. So then we came away, went to Tennessee. It was good conversing with these guys, getting to know them at the deeper level, and to really look forward to, talking about what happened at the camp and discussing everything that happened. And it was just a surreal experience, and there's a lot of lessons along the way, right? Getting to know these guys, also carried within me this weight of like, is it time for me to take my family and move out of Canada with all the things that are going on and things that I've been speaking on this podcast about? Canada is at such a low point that I've just never felt this way before. And so, showed up at the camp with this expectation, like, Lord, you're going to meet me. And really walked away with this trust, right? That to bury and to put to fire this fear that God has it within me and God's going to take care of me, and that I have the wherewithal to make the decision with the discernment, and that I know. And so, not any closer to any kind of answer, but, prayerfully seeking God and trusting in him in this whole thing. Man, I don't know really how I'm going to end this podcast because, I feel like there's so many things that have been left unsaid, and there's some things that perhaps should not be put onto the airwaves for the purpose of keeping the sanctity and the confidentiality of the space. I do feel like perhaps I may have overshared in this podcast episode, but, I prayerfully ask God for the words to share about it. And so, if my words offends anybody, like, it's really not on me, I feel, right? You can walk away with what you want. And if your perspective is I'm going to be offended listening to this, or any mention of me is going to offend me, though I haven't specifically mentioned any names, well, then you can be offended, right? Like, I frankly don't really care. And you've known, if you've listened to this podcast before, I really don't care. Because you can walk away with anything. If your perspective is that it's going to be a difficult, or it's going to be an unenjoyable experience, then you're going to find things to validate that. And if you're looking for things to offend you, you're going to find things that will offend you. But if you're looking for education and you're open-minded and you want to grow and you want to lean into discomfort and you're willing to ask the difficult questions of yourself, man, your life is going to change. And that's really what I want this podcast to be about. And so the trip ended well, right? Dropped me off at Atlanta. Good conversations with Dan, right? Our conversations always go really deep, and I come away with a lot of things for Noble Father, right? The way that we're doing meetups, and Dan has helped me along the way in that sense because we've talked about it ad nauseum about things and things that we see that are incongruent, and how is our community, facilitating the perpetuation of boys in our community, in our world, and not pushing and striving towards the standard of manhood that Jesus presented in his life. Always very critical of ourselves, right? What can we do better? What can we optimize in our lives to benefit our families, ourselves, our businesses, whatever thing that God is stewarding in our lives, or asks us to steward. What are we showing up as men, or are we showing up as boys? And that's a very glaring and stark reality when you look into those questions unapologetically, and giving each other hunting license, right? Brian Tome describes it in his book as hunting license, giving your friends hunting license to call out the BS, the dark blind spots that we have in our lives, and help us to improve and grow, in those little areas. And optimize ourselves, right? Micro adjustments, as we like to call it, from the book Atomic Habits, making adjustments to grow better and do better. And so, it really felt like when I came home, the boyish qualities were diminishing, and the manhood, the man that is coming out, making the difficult decisions, is coming out more. Still not a perfect journey. I'm still improving, still trying to get better. There's a lot of things that I need to improve upon. I'm still very much seeing the imperfections in my own walk and in my own life. And it's just ironing it out and, asking God to guide me, show me, give me strength, right? Though I throw the little toy soldier into the fire, it's not that fear completely diminishes. It's completely gone. It's going to be a demon that I wrestle with and fight with constantly over and over again, taking up my cross every day and sacrificially nailing that thing to the cross and trusting God and walking forward with my cross. That's my walk. That's every man's walk. And you know what? Like, it's not a walk that only benefits me. It'll benefit my children. It'll benefit my children's children. It'll benefit my wife, my marriage, my business, my stewardship at church, whatever else that I have to do. It benefits all of those things. And so, if you're listening to this, like, really ask yourself, like, what are your boyish tendencies? If you're a man, what are your boyish tendencies that you need to put behind? And one of the best things about what we do in Noble Father is, we hold each other accountable. And, growing is something that needs to come from a place of discomfort. And we speak so boldly into each other's problems, right? Saying things that we need to hear, not what we want to hear. And the society is so, it's so complacent and complicit in keeping us in our bullshit, like making us stay in the things that we don't, we shouldn't find ourselves in. It's not optimal for us, right? God has better things for us. And if we continue to stay in those areas, man, like, you can't expect your kingdom to thrive if your king doesn't rise, right? And so, if you're listening to this for the first time and you are interested in our community, we have a trial where you can join us. You can attend meetups, attend our accountability masterminds, and you see how we do community together. And it starts from one place, right? It starts from the heart, inside the heart, outwards. We go deep in there and we ask, we talk, and we try to draw out more information out of these guys. And like, these are guys who show up very real, right? When you're going beneath the surface, you are surrounded by guys who are also doing that. And so you kind of raise the average of the community and of the guys. And like I tell every single person, right? You can either come to the community and the boyish quality would be to take from the community and not give back anything, is that what you come to realize is that your story is actually very powerful, and that somebody out there actually needs to hear what you need to say, to know that they're not alone and that they can come out the other end. And so we have so many guys on different walks of life, right? Different phases of life, right? That what's coming, what's to expect, what's expected. And you also know that you will come out better, and that your story has a place and it'll serve somebody else along the way in the future. And it starts from one place. It starts from investing in yourself. Dads, one of the things that society has put into our heads is that we leave the breadcrumbs for ourselves. But what's crazy about that is that it's actually a huge contradiction. You can't actually give the best to your children if you don't give yourself the best as fathers. And so one of the first things you have to do is realize that we need to put skin in the game. The resources that you earn and you make has to go into sowing into yourself in order for you to reap a harvest for your children, for your children's children, for your wife, for your marriage, for your business, whatever. And so we're going deeper, right? Currently, right now, I'm still grandfathering the first 50 guys into the community at $25 per month. This is not going to be an offer that stays open forever. We're also looking to add new tiers where there's going to be more coming, more growth coming, and that has its value as well. And there will be a generational, exponential ROI on these things, some that are unseen, right? that's kind of the thing, is that there's an unseen level of growth. It was amazing to take part in man camp, see Dan and myself, just seeing the standard of men that we held ourselves to for so long. And then you show up at a thing called man camp and you realize, man, there's so many boys in men's bodies that just they refuse to grow for so long. And you just see the distance that you've taken in your growth from where they are. Older men who are, no offense, just boys in men's clothing, men's bodies. And it's just glaring how wide of a disparity that is. And if you're interested in man camp, man, go check it out. Like every year they do it, and like great community, getting to worship under that tent with all these men together, man, it was just, I've never taken part in an event like that. And so, and so if you're listening to this, and you find this helpful, please share this with your friends. If you're interested in the trial, please reach out. I'd love to hook you in to take part in our meetups. Man, it's just a great space. And, we're only getting started. Man Camp probably started that way as well. They had 500 guys start out. We started out with 9 and now we're 50s. So, wanting to grow this community, I really need your help. Please reach out to dads if they have any interest in going deep and beyond the surface level. Want to do social media different. Actually find good connections and good brotherly bonds online. Please reach out. Would love to connect and hook you in that way. Thank you for listening to this podcast. It doesn't. I never want to take that for granted. I want to express my gratitude and support. And I know that there are people who listen to this podcast from all stretches of the world. The statistics I have, I think it was like 39 countries all over the world that are listening to this podcast, which kind of like blows my mind and just boggles my mind. I just want to express that gratitude to you. Thank you so much for all the support. And just remember, right? We're not promised tomorrow. So be intentional and be present with your family. And until next time, bye for now.